Okay, for number 7, you're going to have to do all these different parts. So we got symmetry it's asking for, intercepts, and you want to circle whether it's even, odd, or neither. The first thing I'm going to do with the way it's written here is I want to turn it into this form instead. I'm going to divide both sides by 3x because it's going to make that easier when we get down to here and do even, odd, or neither, because we have to basically turn that into an f of x and plug a negative x in. So to make that easier for later, I'm going to work with that form there. Now, when you do this on the test, make sure you label each part that you're doing. If I just see some scratch work on here and nothing's labeled, then I may take off points because I may not know what work you're trying to show. So for instance, when we're doing symmetry, why don't you actually write out x-axis, y-axis, and origin, so that way I'll know what work that you're doing on your test. So this is what I mean by label your work. Now with the x-axis, you're putting in a negative y for y. So if we put that in here, we get 9 minus x squared over 3x. And the idea with these different tests is you put negative y in for y, you're going to simplify it. If you don't get the same thing that you started with, then you know it doesn't have that symmetry. In this case, I put that in there and it's no. It doesn't have that kind of symmetry, so no x-axis symmetry. Next, let's try the y-axis. Y-axis, you put in negative x for x into this one. Okay, so if we do that, we have y equals 9 minus negative x squared over 3 times negative x. And when we simplify that one, we get 9 minus x squared over negative 3x. That's not equal to the original one either. So once again, this is another one that we have to put no. So there's no x-axis symmetry and no y-axis symmetry. We did both these checks. We got no. But there's one more that we have to test. So I'm going to do the origin. So hopefully you have all this. I'm going to erase this here. So the last one that we're going to look at is origin symmetry. So we did x-axis, y-axis, so now we're going to do origin symmetry. And so for origin symmetry, you do negative x for x and negative y for y. We'll put that into this one. So we have negative y equals, we put negative x in on this side. Okay, so you put negatives in for both. And again, we're going to simplify it. If you get the original one you started with, then it does have that symmetry. Now for this, we have negative y equals 9 minus x squared. This negative goes away, but that one out front is still going to be there. Down below, you have negative 3x. Notice that we have a negative on both sides of the equation. So if you multiply both sides by negative 1 or just simply cancel out the negative, then notice what we get. We get exactly the same one that we started with. So because we get the same one that we started with, we know that for this one, the answer there, it's going to be origin. This says origin symmetry. So the next thing we're going to look at is intercepts. So once again, we want to make sure we label these so we know which one it is that we're actually doing on the test. Now, if you're doing x-intercept, the rule is you put in a 0 for y. So I put 0 in here. I have 0 equals 9 minus x squared over 3x. And I want to solve this. Now the way that you want to solve this one is we're going to take this whole thing and multiply both sides by the denominator. So the denominator is 3x there. I want that to go away. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 3x. If I multiply 3x times the 0 there, I get 0. So I get 0 there, and on this side, the 3x's cancel out, and you get 9 minus x squared. So now I'm going to take that, 0 equals 9 minus x squared. We can factor this one, x plus 3, x minus 3. And what we get is we end up getting x is equal to plus or minus 3 when we solve that. So therefore, that's what your x-intercept is going to be, plus or minus 3. So for x-intercept, you're always putting in a 0 for y. So now the next thing we want to do is we want to find the y-intercept, and that happens when you put in a 0 for x. So it's always opposite variable that you're putting the 0 in for. Let's do that one now. We have y equals 9 minus 0 squared over 3 times 0. Now in this case what happens is we can't divide by 0. You get a 0 down below, so essentially we end up getting 9 over 0. If you end up with something like that where you have division by 0, then that means we have to put none on the blank there for y-intercept. Okay, so just because I got none on the sample, that doesn't mean that the actual test is going to be the same way. Don't just memorize the problems. Make sure you understand the process behind that. So this particular one, I got none, but that doesn't mean the one in the test is going to be that way as well. You're just putting a 0 in. If you end up doing division by 0, that's when you put none. Now if this was reversed and I had 0 on top, 0 divided by 9, that would be okay. Then that would be 0. It would be the answer in that case. But in this case, the 0 is in the bottom, can't divide by 0, so I get none. Okay, now the last one I want to look at is whether it's even, odd, or neither. Then this is where it's better to have it written in this form, because now what's going to happen is I'm going to put an f of x in there instead of a y. The test for this, if you're testing for even, odd, or neither, you have to put a negative x in for x and simplify it. If you get the same thing you started with, it's even. If you get exactly the same thing you started with a minus sign out front, it's odd. And if you don't get either of those, then you'll put neither for your answer. So for this one, let's put in a negative x. So f of negative x we're going to do, so 9 minus negative x squared over 3 times negative x. And we want to simplify this. Now when you simplify, you get 9 minus x squared, and on the bottom we end up with a negative 3x. Now this can be rewritten with a negative out front. So I have the 3x is going to go down below here, and I have that on the outside. Well, notice I have the original one that I started with, but I have a negative sign out front. So that's the same thing as negative f of x is what I ended up with. So I put in f of negative x, I worked through all this, and I ended up getting a negative out front of the original one. That's the definition for odd. So this particular one is odd, so again, on the test, you'll do the same thing. You want to find f of negative x. If you get exactly the same thing, it's even, but in this case, we got a negative out front, so it's odd.